Hello everyone, I'm JoltKing627, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Big Power Electric Model 508. Let's get right into it. Alright, before we get started, full disclosure, Big Power Electric did send this to me free of charge for purposes of review, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them for that. Now, with that out of the way, let's see what you get in the package. Inside we find the blaster, stock attachment, 2 magazines, 3 targets, scope attachment, protective eyewear, batteries, darts, instructions, and a pamphlet showing their releases. Included are 3 of these targets that can be knocked over, and they have little locking lugs on the base so that you can actually connect them together. They also include some rudimentary eye protection. It's tinted red and it distorts your vision quite a bit, but it's still nice of them to include it. They also include 100 of their standard darts. The foam is nice quality, but unfortunately the tips are hard, solid rubber. They have absolutely no compression to them whatsoever. They're effectively FVJ, so they're not really safe at all. Don't use these. We have plenty of other good darts on the market that will work just fine. They also include 2 of these 12-round magazines. Now I'm going to recommend against using these magazines. Because of how their feed lips are shaped, they hold the dart slightly lower, and that actually compounded an issue with the blaster that we'll talk about later. And finally, here we have the actual blaster. The blaster is a magazine-fed semi-automatic flywheeler. Like the other Big Power Electric products, the plastic quality is surprisingly high. There's little to no creak or flex in this entire blaster. On this side of the blaster, you can see we have a jam door. It flips open like so. Unfortunately, the locking tab on this seems to be a little bit loose, so it tends to come flapping open randomly. Right next to it here we have the battery door. This blaster takes 6 AA batteries. Interesting to note, the battery door screw appears to be just like a regular Nerf shell screw. It doesn't retain itself into the battery door, and it seems to be screwing directly into the plastic of the shell. There's no nut behind there. That's disappointing because it makes this screw hole much more likely to strip out. Up here we have an N-Strike compatible rail with an included scope attachment. This is the same scope that can be found on the Model 505 that we reviewed last week. It attaches quite solidly and can go on all of your existing N-Strike rail. And vice versa, all of your Nerf attachments can fit perfectly fine on this blaster. At the back here we have a stock attachment. Now while at first this may look like an N-Strike stock attachment point and N-Strike stock, unfortunately they're not. It's very close, but it's actually too small. The attachment can't lock in, and it's actually rather loose on there. And vice versa, the stock cannot work on N-Strike stock points. The N-Strike stock point is actually too big for this. As well as, the stock actually goes too far down this way. You'd have to cut some of this off so it could clear this ledge. The stock is at least adjustable with this lever right here. You can make it smaller. Unfortunately, I don't really see much point to that because at its longest position, it's about the length of a Retaliator stock, which is already pretty short. I'm a small guy, so this isn't a problem for me, but I know it might be an issue for larger nerfers. The ergonomics of the blaster are mostly decent. The foregrip is plenty comfortable, and the main grip is mostly comfortable except for one thing. That being the rev trigger, which is a very odd size. It appears to be about 1.5 fingers long. It's too small for 2 fingers, but it's too large for 1 finger. A little bit weird. The magwell is compatible with all of your favorite N-Strike full-length magazines, and the mag release is right here in the trigger guard, which isn't great, but it works. The trigger pull is very smooth, or at least it was after I fixed everything in this blaster. And that unfortunately brings us to the numerous issues I had with this blaster. Now, I have seen other people with this blaster. They did not seem to have the issues that I was experiencing. I don't know if they changed production somehow, or if I have some form of lemon, but when I got this, it just wasn't working right at all. Thankfully, I was able to fix most of these issues, and I'll show you how when we get to the internals, but it was still very annoying to have to do. The first issue, and this is rather minor, was the magwell was actually very, very tight. Tight enough that it was actually able to stop one of my 6-round magazines from feeding its last 2 darts. The second issue was the positioning of the magazine in the magwell and the entrance to the flywheel cage. The issue here is the entrance to the flywheel cage is small and completely flat. The head of the dart would hit the bottom edge of the hole there. And when it did, it would cause massive resistance on the trigger until the dart finally bent enough that it would finally force its way through into the cage and fire. Remember how the included magazines hold darts a little bit lower than a normal mag? Yeah, that made things even worse. I put this down to the design of the cage more than I do to the magwell. If you take a look at an actual Nerf cage, like this modulus cage, you can see the hole is much wider and it's actually sloped on the edges quite well. This means even if the dart starts out a little low, it gets guided up and properly enters the cage. So to fix the issue, as you'll see in the internals section, all I had to do was carve out the bottom edge of the hole. Now the blaster feeds just fine. And the final issue is the performance is absolutely terrible. Other people had theirs hitting Elite Standard and above, but mine hit nowhere near that. Even on the freshest of fresh batteries, I was only hitting high 40s, low 50s. I have stock jolts that hit harder than that. As you'll see in the internals section, I went ahead and actually modified this blaster. I replaced the flywheels with the stock flywheels from a Nerf Strife. This gives it slightly better crush on the flywheels, which leads to slightly better performance. Even after those mods, however, it was only hitting about 65. Remember, this is running on 6 AA batteries. It should be hitting a little bit harder than 65. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the internals, and I'll show you how to fix all of the issues that I had with this blaster should you get one and have the same issues that I did. Now, let's go ahead and get this open. There's a small spot here at the top rail where it's a little tight, so just be aware of that. It's not that you missed a screw, it's that it just is naturally a bit tight in there. Now we want to be careful because the battery tray is on this side of the shell. And now we've got it open. So the internals are pretty basic. As you can see, it's essentially a Strife. You've got the same style lever pusher and a rev trigger down here. The flywheel cage has foam pads to help deaden the sound on both sides, and the wheels are concave in the center with ribbing on the outer edges. The concavity lets it fire the included hard-tip darts without breaking the flywheels. The motors are 130 sized, so our hobby motors should fit in here just fine. The faux barrel is higher quality than the one on the 505. The cut may be uneven on the end here, but it is not cracked in any place and it's pretty smooth on the inside. And down here at the bottom, if we take out this one screw, we can take off this plate and access our switch. And as you can see, yet again, the lock that stops you from pulling the main trigger without pulling the rev trigger is a separate piece that you could easily take out. Now let's take a look at how to fix the issues I had with the blaster. First off, we need to shave down the flywheel cage so that darts will actually feed correctly. You want to tackle this edge right here. I basically took a deburring tool and kept removing material until darts fed properly. I wasn't having any accuracy issues with this one, but just in case, I put a washer underneath the screw that holds in the pusher to make sure it can't bend at all. To fix the tight magwell issue, I took a file to the outer 2 of the 3 ribs on each side of the magwell. This got the magwell loose enough to not be an issue anymore. To get a little bit more performance out of it, I replaced the stock wheels with the stock wheels from a Nerf Strife. They get slightly better crush at the expense of no longer being able to use the included hard tip darts, because the hard tips might actually shatter the flywheels. Reassembly is easy, just be sure not to pinch any wires while you're putting it back together. All the screws are the same size. Alright, now that we've got this all fixed up, let's go see it fire. Alright, we're not going to be using any of the included hard-tip darts because this is now modified and would probably break if I tried to put those through it. So instead, first up, we're going to use some Avenger Force Wafflehead darts. And now some Dart Zone Chili darts. And finally, some AccuFakes. Okay, final thoughts. This is gonna be a difficult one. My opinion on this kind of hinges on whether my unit is a lemon or it's an actual change in production. I know people have gotten these in the past and they've worked just fine, getting elite performance or above and not having any feeding issues. So if my unit is simply a lemon and all of the others work properly, then I'd have to say this is a decent blaster. It comes with a lot for your $35, including batteries, which is not something you see very often. But on the other hand, if this isn't a lemon and it's actually just a change in production to use worse motors and have issues with the feeding, I can't recommend this. In that scenario, unless you really like the aesthetics and are willing to put in the effort to fix and modify it, it's not really worth buying. There are plenty of other Strifeoid blasters on the market that do the same thing as this, but better. Personally, I'm a little bit disappointed in this blaster, but that's not to say it's all bad. The potential is there, it's just going to take a decent amount of effort to bring it out. If you want to give it a try, I'll have a link down in the description box below to Amazon where you can purchase this blaster. And that just about wraps it up. Once again, a huge thank you to Big Power Electric for sending me this blaster. Like, comment, subscribe, check out the merch, and thank you all for watching.